Okay. Thank you everyone for their patience tonight. It has been a long meeting, so we do appreciate everyone's patience. Can I call upon an objector to go first? Sorry, it has been a long night. Narelle, please.
Thank you, Councillor. DED 6715 is considering an application for 6 double-storey dwellings at 180 Glenlyon Road. The site is on the south side of Glenlyon Road. It's in a neighbourhood residential zone. There's a zoning map up on the screen there. And this is the subject site. And the site is just outside of the Brunswick Major Activity Centre. The site has 2 street frontages, one to Glenlyon Road, which you can see in the top photo, and one to Jenkins Street at the rear, which you can see in that photo. The proposal is described at page 64 of tonight's agenda, with the latest version of the plans at pages 89 to 98 of the agenda. The report notes that the application has been progressively modified from 7 dwellings with 3-storey form down to 6 double-storey dwellings. 17 objections have been received to the application. The consultation meeting was held on the 4th of June. There were a few outcomes from that consultation meeting, including the applicant agreeing to a front fence to Glenlyon Road, some modifications of materials to the dwellings fronting Glenlyon Road, and some additional shadow diagram information. The key planning considerations have been Council's neighbourhood character policy and the fact that the site is in a minimal change area. The Res Code requirements, in particular the off-site amenity impacts of the proposal and the functionality of the proposal, including vehicle movements and the provision of site services. It is recommended that a notice of decision to grant a permit be issued, subject to the conditions at pages 60 to 63 of tonight's agenda. I draw the Council's attention to conditions 1A to D, G, I and J, which deal with the Res Code non-compliances, and conditions 1, E and F, which deal with the outcomes of the consultation meeting.
Thank you. Okay, is there a brave objector that wants to go first?
Sure. Could I please ask the Chair if we could have a look at that picture that's up there?
Sure.
On the document that we were given, and it was available online, and this is on page 72 of the document sheet that we've got just up here to my left, it states that there are 4 objectors which are not shown on this map. So I just want clarification about why those 4 objectors are not there, because I'm not there and my property runs right along the right-hand side of the blue marked property here, nor is the lady who lives directly behind, so she'll be at 182. So the 2 people who live or own the properties just to the right or to the eastern side of the property, they're objecting dots are not there. Any reason?
No.
Apanos, we did note today that the 2 objections received from 184 Glenlyon Road and 9 Jenkins Street were actually submitted from different property addresses, although they did note in their submission that they were owners of the properties. So we do acknowledge that.
Sure.
We were made aware that they had...
I'm sorry?
We were made aware that those 2 residents...
I know, it just, when you look at that document though, it suggests that the people next door are not objecting. So I just wanted to make that clear.
First question we asked.
Yes, thank you. I just wanted to draw your attention also to the response to objectors' concerns, which is part 5 of your document. It doesn't respond to my concerns about the setback to Jenkins Street itself. There's a lot of discussion within the document about the setback to Glenlyon Road, which makes sure that it follows the character of Glenlyon Road, but Jenkins Street is ignored in this particular case. In fact, in part 3 of your policy implication, it actually acknowledges that there should be a 2.5 metre setback to Jenkins Street, which is obviously not taken into consideration. What they have done is look at the property to the right-hand side of that particular diagram, which is up behind you, where there is a warehouse which abuts the footpath, and they have decided that they are going to work or build a long line to that, which means my property, which is on the left-hand side, is going to be well and truly pushed back behind what is built up against Jenkins Street. Every other property on the northern side of Jenkins Street, where my property is actually has a setback. So no other property, except for that warehouse right on the corner, is up against the footpath. Not only does the building abut the footpath, but it also has a brick warehouse look facade, which actually runs right across the front of the property. Now, there obviously is no warehouse there at the moment, and I understand that it is a design element, but it goes right across the property. So I've got a huge brick fence or brick wall up against the footpath next to my property. Recent developments, as in developments within the last few years around that particular area, all take into consideration the setbacks, particularly because these are very small streets. I note that some of the previous people who came in talking about their streets are actually talking about highways compared to Jenkins Street. So it is obvious that, for me personally, that any open space in Jenkins Street would be an advantage rather than a disadvantage. My question to council is whether the setbacks in Glenline Road obviously have been put into place, and I'm questioning why Jenkins Street, which is obviously a small residential street, doesn't get the same consideration as Glenline Road.
Can you begin to wind up, because we're just over time?
Sure. There's also a concern about some amendments that have been suggested in the document, including things like increasing balcony sizes to dwellings 5 and 6, which actually front Jenkins Street. Now, if we're going to increase those particular balconies, how much more space is going to be taken over? Is it possible that we can move from a 6-unit property to a 5-unit property? That could accommodate extra large balconies. That could accommodate a setback on Jenkins Street. That could retain some of the character of that particular neighbourhood. Thank you.
Okay, is there another objector? No. Is there a representative from the applicant? Come.
Hi guys, my name's Anthony and I'm representing the applicant. First of all, I'd just like to say that the development, we've worked pretty hard with council over the last year, and the development has a high compliance with clause 55 and council's neighbourhood character policy clause 2201. We not only say this, but also council's planning department says this in the report that's been submitted, and that they have recommended approval of this development. The application started with 8 dwellings and 6 of them were 3-storey, and we didn't have a visitor car space. Upon advertising the application and talking with council, we've taken 2 dwellings out of the application, and we've reduced all the dwellings to double-storey, and we've put in a visitor car space to help with some of the concerns of both the council and the objectors. In regard to, so one of the, I think at the consult meeting it was pretty, we managed to agree on certain things, and we did provide some further shadow diagrams to ensure that the neighbouring properties weren't impacted by shadowing, and then we agreed to some things like the front fence and changing a bit of the facade. One thing that we haven't spoken about tonight is that with the previous objector, Antoinette, she lives to the right. One of her concerns was with the facade of the building. So if we go to the plans. So yeah, so where that parapet wall is there, that we can actually lower that wall. So, and then you will see more of the balcony. So you'll have probably a bit more outlook to the street, and that we've got plans here. I think we emailed them to Niall. I'm not sure if you guys have seen the plans. These were discussions that we had after with Antoinette, and we're more than happy to do that, if that's going to help out. One of probably the only planning issue that was raised was the front setback to that street, and I think the council's assessment of that standard is correct. So the front setback is assessed from Glenline Road, and we comply with the front setback. The rear setback, it's a rear setback, it's not a front boundary to that site. And how it has been deemed okay is because it follows the brick wall of the neighbouring property to the west. And then pretty much Jenkins Street, it doesn't have a consistent front setback character where dwellings are landscaped within the front setbacks and they've got massive setbacks. If they have a setback, there's probably like a balcony or a patio within that front setback. So it doesn't have a consistent front setback pattern like Glenline Road does. And that's how us and council came to the conclusion of that boundary wall or being appropriate in that circumstance. I think there was no other. The objectors didn't really raise any other.
Okay, I'll just give an opportunity for councillors to see if they have any questions.
We have
Councillor
seen.
Thompson.
Sorry, we have seen the alternate plans and a reduction in the eastern side. The brick parapet to Jenkins Street to 3.2 metres maximum height would be something we'd probably would be interested in as a condition, if that was possible. Is that something that you?
Yeah, I don't know. Have you seen the plan?
No, we have.
Okay.
We have seen it. So yeah.
Okay, any other questions? Okay, no. Okay, Councillor Rob Thompson.
Look, I'm happy to move an alternate which just includes a couple of those further conditions which we've subsequently seen in the last little while. So DD 67/15, an alternate recommendation which includes two additional conditions. One N, providing the fence to the central courtyard of 9 Jenkins Street of a 1.8 metre height. And additional condition 1.0, reduce the eastern side of the brick parapet to Jenkins Street to 3.2 metres height. I have a seconder, I'll speak to
Thank
it.
you, Councillor. Is there a seconder?
No.
Councillor Gillies? Councillor Thompson?
Obviously, again, beauty is in the eye of the beholder. When we looked at particularly the Jenkins Street side of it, which is not a front, it's a rear, and the continuation of the warehouse in that Brunswick location, I sort of thought, it was quite in keeping. Obviously, the neighbour right to the right of that has a differing opinion, but it is the rear of the block. The concern here for me, and if you look at a couple of the other blocks in that area, have already been subdivided into two, a Glenline and a Jenkins Street. If that was to happen, then a developer could come along, subdivide the two and actually build 4 units in each of those, giving us 8 units without any concern whatsoever, as long as they get into some others. So being able to reduce it back to 6 has been a relatively good win for those people in that location as far as numbers of vehicles and people. But in doing that, and to make it work for this developer, they've had to sort of wiggle room and say that the Jenkins Street is now not a frontage, it's the rear. And that's probably where we've accepted, where I've accepted this, and hope that other councillors can see that that's a bit of a win in this particular one, but I know there's a win across the board.
So you can sit down, Anthony. Is there Councillor Gillies? No? Okay. Is there any other discussion? No, then I'll put it to the vote. All those in favour? All those against? I declare that carried. Narelle, you can tell us the process from here.
The Urban Planning Committee has resolved to issue a notice of decision to grant planning permits subject to the conditions set out in the alternate recommendation. All objectors and the applicant will now receive a copy of that notice of decision. The objectors will have 21 days in which to lodge an appeal with VCAT against council's decision. The applicant will have 60 days in which to lodge an appeal against any conditions.
Thank you, Narelle. Okay. Councillors, before we move on to DED 68, which is 90 Collier Crescent, Brunswick West, we are approaching 10 o'clock, and under the standing orders, I must ask if council wishes to extend the meeting time beyond 10 o'clock. Councillor Thompson? Okay, so extend the meeting to hear the rest of the agenda, which is 2 items. Can I put that to the vote? All those in favour? All those opposed? I declare that carried. Okay, DED 68, which is 90 Collier Crescent, Brunswick West.
Here he is.
Just in time.
She goes on a time sheet, don't she?
Who in the Rallingham? No.
Take your time. You're watching TV, it's 7 seconds away.
Yeah,
Friends, councillors, it's getting late, so let's keep moving and be focused. Robert, welcome, and can you take us through this application, please?
Thank you, councillors and members of the gallery. The next item for this evening is a development at number 90 Collier Crescent in Brunswick West. The proposal is for the partial demolition of the existing dwelling and the construction of a new dwelling to the rear and the reduction of car parking. So as you can see, the site has 2 street frontages, one to Collier Crescent, one to Teague Avenue, and the unusual alignment of Collier Crescent to some extent presents it as the front yard as having 3 sides, 3 street frontages, which I'll come to shortly. Obviously, the bottom of the site has some substantial vegetation. Subject land is zoned neighbourhood residential zone, and it's affected by a overlay, which is Collier Crescent precinct. The application's been to refer to Council's Heritage Advisor, who has made a comment doesn't have any objection to the proposal. The proposal is, as I mentioned, a second dwelling. It's a double-storey dwelling to the rear of the existing site, essentially extending through to the boundary with 88 Collier Crescent to the east. Car parking, open car parking spaces to within the front setback and private open space. New dwelling in the front setback. In addition, there's a balcony to the new dwelling. Front setback for the new dwelling is proposed at 1.2 metres, then stepping back. Proposed design of the new dwelling. So contemporary built form. And that's the view line as taken from Collier Crescent. One of the unusual aspects of the proposal is that the architect has proposed secluded private open space in the front yard of the existing dwelling by way of mounding the earth up and actually a retaining wall in the centre of the front yard. 1 metre high retaining wall, and that's private open space. As I said, Collier Crescent wraps around and a proposal for a high fence on the side of the 23 objections to the application, and a consultation meeting was held on the 11th of June, which led to some of the complaints and submitted in an attempt to address some concerns of the residents. The recommendation that's been put forward by the officer is one of support for the proposal. Thank you, councillors.
Thank you. Is there an objective? I'd like to go first.
Typically, when we call up the Teague Avenue view of the proposal,
Is that possible?
It's probably the most relevant in the context. I'm Tim Grundy from 88 Collier Crescent, resident there for 21 years. The 90 Collier Crescent site sits in the heart of the HO51 Heritage Overlay. It's within 20 metres of 3 properties in Teague Avenue that are specifically listed in the Victorian Heritage Database as being the heritage assets for this HO51 area. If you had to identify a site within the heritage overlay where heritage really mattered, this would be it. It's telling that the applicant references their design against a number of properties that are on the edge of the heritage overlay or adjacent to it. The applicant doesn't reference properties that are close by to 90 Collier Crescent because it's just not in keeping. The proposal is just not in keeping with those properties. The proposal is not in keeping with the visual bulk and form of the dwellings in the area. The high-pitched roof results in a greater first floor massing than you would see on any of the other properties due to the higher roof angle. The box-like ground floor form is built to the boundaries with no eaves. The proposal is not in keeping with neighbourhood or heritage character. The tall front facade is topped by a terrace or a balcony. There's minimal rear secluded private open space. There's the front located secluded private open space for both dwellings on the proposal and high front fences. The secluded private open space at the front of the existing dwelling is on the short boundary and has a wide viewing angle to Collier Crescent, and so it will have a significant negative amenity to that street view, which is characterised by low fences and garden views. The second dwelling is submitted as a 2-bedroom dwelling when the floor plans indicate 3 bedrooms. The proposal does not comply with a number of standards of the Moreland planning scheme, instead arguing reasonable non-compliance, including overshadowing of the secluded private open space at 88 Collier Crescent. We should not be talking in this instance about reasonable non-compliance. It's worth noting that there was a previous planning permit granted for this site, which had minimal local objection. I think I was the only one, and that was to do with overshadowing concerns. This one has obviously hit a nerve in terms of the volume of local objections and the interest in it. And it's the heritage aspect that is driving that. So the overall picture painted by the planning scheme non-compliances and the losses of amenity associated with this proposal is one of overdevelopment. And in this case, it should be refused. Thanks.
Thank you. Is there another objector?
Thank you, councillors. When I arrived tonight, I was really impressed by the fact that Moreland Council seems to make a really big effort about sustainability. In the car park there is spots for electric cars. And it's good to see that this is actually happening. But this development here, I reckon, really flies in the face of the initiatives that Moreland Council's putting together. This building is going to require significant energy inputs. We've got lots of glass here facing west and no effort to actually think about the fact that this type of structure is going to heat up and it's going to require air conditioning and lots of energy like that. There just doesn't seem to be any respect for the aspect. But I'd like to continue on with the conversation that Tim Grundy actually brought to us before. And the heritage overlay is something that's very, very important for this area. Moreland is smart to actually recognise that there are specific areas that need to be looked at, and this intersection here is one of the key points in the whole of Moreland. Diane McIntosh, when she was writing the Moreland Heritage Report for this area, said that there was this, the architecture was of significance, particularly in Teague Avenue, and it's distinguished by intact post-war cottages, and that's not what we're seeing with this particular development here. So the heritage is absolutely compromised by this, what I would quite comfortably say is insensitive development. And I think that the residents of this particular area deserve better, and I think that the whole of Moreland deserves better than this development. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Is there another objector? Come forward, please.
Rod McLennan's my name. I'm a resident at number 7, T Avenue, and my main objections are along the lines of neighbourhood character and not respecting the heritage significance of the area, and just in terms of the heritage, the neighbourhood character, just the visual bulk and the manufacturing of the private open space on Collier Crescent. It is in a very prominent position, and it's, the property is visible from Collier Crescent and all along, Teague Avenue, and the fact that it does face onto Teague Avenue, and as David did mention, that Teague Avenue with interwar housing is specifically mentioned in the heritage overlay and the significance, and it really will dominate the streetscape. So, the council has done a very good job historically in preserving these types of areas, and it really would detract to allow something like this, which will, catch people's eyes, just particularly with the balcony at the front and the form of the building. It's, pointless having heritage overlays if they're not protected. So, the council would uphold that.
Okay, thank you. Another objector? Please come forward.
Thanks very much. My name's Ian Malk and I'm at 86 Collier Crescent. Unlike Tim, I haven't been in my home for 21 years. I've only been there just over 2 years. And the reason I moved to Collier Crescent from elsewhere in Brunswick was to escape overdevelopment. And the reason I moved and sold my home of 21 years was a proposal for a 4-story commercial dwelling that backed onto a single-fronted little weatherboard home. And thankfully, council rejected that proposal, and I'm hoping council will do the same today. I deliberately moved to Collier Crescent because of the nature of the neighborhood, the character, the kinds of homes that are there. They're unique, they're small, they're subtle looking, they're not overdeveloped, and there was a heritage overlay. I thought that was meant to protect me as a new resident from this kind of development, and I'm quite concerned at the prospect of the nature of heritage overlays being diminished and becoming meaningless as a concept in reality. I won't go on too much longer. I think others have said what the concerns I have are the neighborhood character, amenity, size, bulk, and so on. And I guess this is more of a disciplinary background matter for me as a lawyer, the precedential nature of an approval of this nature. I am concerned for the rest of the neighborhood. I'm concerned of the number of sites that really can't support 2 buildings on them, then yielding to planning applications to, in fact, produce that sort of result. And I think a decision in favour of the applicant here would be really deleterious and negative and have a very seriously negative precedential effect on the neighbourhood. It's a very special neighbourhood. I think it's very unlike anything else in Moreland, very different to what's going on in central part of Brunswick. I think it's got to be preserved. And I think this would be, if nothing else, the thin edge of a very bad wedge. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Is there another objector? No more objectors. Is there a representative from the applicant? Please come forward.
My name is Andrew Millard-Basson from Urban Creative. We're the architects and applicant. I have here with me the owners of the property. We have Peter and Mariana Dragovic. Before I speak, would I be able to request that they also be able to speak directly, not just through me?
Sure.
Great. I'll cover things architecture and design, and they'll cover things to do with intent with that property, why they've bought it, why they've bought into the area. I've also brought some drawings to help the discussion, if I can table those. Is that okay?
Sure, you can bring those forward. Sorry, thank you. Yeah, I'll distribute them. That's fine.
I have further drawings if we need to expand on any particular point in question and answer. I've tried my best to summarise this down to about 5 pages from about 60 in the application. Now, there's a number of aspects obviously to consider with this proposal as any proposal, and we've covered a number of them in the discussion to this point. It is indeed a special area, and we have sought to submit a proposal that celebrates the area. No, it's not a duplicate heritage dwelling, although it does have elements that try to make a dialogue with that heritage value, along with introducing elements that respond to the heritage provisions idea of introducing innovation rather than replication. The first diagram that I've given you tonight is a map of Heritage Area 51, and we've sought to identify change and development over time. You'll see in colour that we've mapped additions and extensions into rear yards. Whilst there's a contention from the objector, first objector, that Tim, that we have focused on the perimeter of the heritage overlay. Actually, we've done a really exhaustive study of the heritage overlay as well as the surrounding neighbourhood. The yellow and the purple are various versions of change. In particular, the yellow are examples of extensions and additions into rear yards. In addition to that, we have some corner sites which have seen two-storey dual occupancy development. They are marked C1. They're either built or approved or in the process of being approved. They're orange and marked C1. In addition to those, there's also the 8 townhouses on the corner of Teague Avenue and Union, which I think everyone would accept as a unique case. What we'd like to draw attention to with these corner sites is that this proposition isn't the beginning of corner sites being developed into dual occupancy. It's part of a trend. And when you think about this as a precedent, there are marked C2, the remaining corners within the Heritage Overlay 51. So C2, there's about 8 of them if you include the subject site. And probably only about 6 of them, including the subject site, could be proposed to be dual occupancy. Some of them are quite tight. The right-hand side triangular site probably could never be a dual occ, for example. So this Heritage Overlay area contains about 60 dwellings, give or take. If all of these 6 corners were to be developed into dual occ, we would see 6 additional dwellings in this area. Now, the idea of the zoning is to keep change to a minimum, and we would contend that that is consistent with that sort of minimum level of change. 6 new dwellings in an area of 60, excluding the rest of the world outside this imaginary line. Now, in addition to that, and reinforced by the heritage overlay, the landlocked sites, the non-corner sites, are unlikely to see new dwellings, separate dwellings built to them. The plan of subdivision is tight. It's going to be very hard to imagine new dwellings built to them. We're going to, therefore, if we're going to see change, it will probably gravitate towards the corners, and that's what we've seen happen so far. This is part of that. And then the insert on that page is just showing where we are in relation to shops, amenity, services, public transport, recreational space, bike paths. And it's part of the context of assessing whether this should be developed.
Can you just wrap up because we're almost out of time?
Okay. Page 2 talks more closely to the site, if you go to page 2. And a lot of the indicators of appropriate degree of development, this proposal complies. Height, we are the same size as the adjacent dwellings. We weren't at first. There have been changes to the scheme. We are now as high or lower than our neighbours, 6 Teague and 88. And in that process, we've also removed overshadowing as a concern into 88, the rear 88 Collier. But all the indicators, height, site coverage, permeability, rear setback, side setback, quantity of private open space, all these, the proposal passes those Clause 55 and in general complies with Clause 55. If you talk stylistically, we do draw on elements that are true to the area. So we have a masonry construction. We have windows set in that masonry construction of a similar proportion to windows you'd expect to see in the area. We do have a glass first floor, or more glass than you might say would be in keeping with the area. But we have introduced a hip roof, which previously was flat. Okay. And so we've attempted to blend elements that talk with the local context and areas that seek to innovate, which is what the heritage provisions provide for. I'm going to push, given Councillor Taplos, you're saying I've got to move on.
Yes,
I'm going to push past
we're
page
over
3.
6 minutes and your time is free, so I've been quite lenient.
I'll push past page 3 a little bit, which is the front setback discussion. The reason why I'm going to push past is because the conditions of the application of the planners suggest a 3 metre setback, whereas we have argued 1.2. This page is intended to talk about that 1.2 setback. The condition already says 3. I have a page that discusses private open space, which I'd be happy to unpack with you, the contention about why and how work in the front. And I'd like to draw your attention to the last page so that I can wind up quickly, to track the changes that have occurred. We've been working 6 months on this application with the planning team and the heritage advisor, and consultation with objectors and discussion. And we have sought to amend the scheme, and it's actually improved. I can honestly say it's a better scheme now than it was when we started. In the process, we've deleted the garage, which is where the living room is now. That used to be proposed to be a garage. We changed the roof profile from flat to hipped. We lowered the dwelling by 300 mil. We expanded the rear courtyard by 150% so that it matches Tim's rear yard, and that gives him more buffer space, more breathing space, and it removes overshadowing as a concern. And there was a series of other smaller changes, including reducing the dwelling footprint by about 16%. So it's now about 140, it was over 150 square metres. All of this we've done in an attempt to make this a genuine addition to the area. The owners, which you'll hear from, want to live there, and they want to live in a well-designed house. They want to be good neighbours, and we've tried to attend to any of the objections that we've seen come through the objection process. Most substantively, we've removed overshadowing to 88 Collier, and I have a shadow diagram which I can table if you wish to see it. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. So, yep, I'll take. Yeah, I'm happy for you to table the overshadow diagram. That's fine.
Sure.
And we'll hear from the owner of the site as well. Sure.
I'll be very brief. My name is Peter Dragovic. That's my wife Marianne and my daughter Natasha. We're the owners of 90 Collier, and Andrew asked me to speak just to our intention when we bought the property was there was a permit in place for an extension, but we had a think and we decided to embark on this development. Our intention is to stay there with our daughter, and it is a 2-bedroom place. There's only the 3 of us that will be living at the premises, and the current property at the front is currently rented, which we hope that it remains that way. From the very outset, we tried to comply with both the planners and heritage. We understand the importance of heritage in the area, and we bought the property fully knowing that it was in the heritage overlay, and we respect that from day one. And I think one of the objectors mentioned Diane McIntosh. She was the heritage advisor and worked very closely with us, and we have now got her approval, which is also important given she's placed the importance on Teague Avenue. We hope, and for the past 6 months, we've worked very hard to get to this point where we have a recommendation to proceed, and we hope to be good neighbours to the people here tonight, and certainly we respect their opinions, and obviously from people who have lived in the area a long time, and we wish to do the same. Over the weekend, Marianne and I went to do a little bit of a door knock within the area and actually spoke to some of the objectors and some people that live in the area and showed them the design and the scheme, and some were happy enough to sign off on a little note to say that they looked through it and they actually support it, which is great for us. So it was good for us to know that there are people there that are not just against it, there actually are some people that are for it, and we hope that we get the opportunity to build and live in the area. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Councillors, are there any questions? No? Okay.
Sorry.
Councillor Rob Thompson.
How long have you owned the property for?
We bought the property in December last year.
So the existing permit is not a permit that you have put, the existing permit for the extension was not something you...
No, that's right.
Okay. If there's no questions, we'll move on to moving motions. Councillor Ratnam.
I'd like to move an alternative motion to that which is in the agenda, that a refusal to grant a planning permit, number MPS 2015/105, be issued for the partial demolition and alteration to an existing dwelling. And that's just the same preface as is in the agenda. It describes the property, and the grounds are as follows. One, the proposed development fails to satisfy the objectives of Clause 55 of the Moreland Planning Scheme, in particular Clause 55.03 street setback. The proposed front wall of the new dwelling does not meet the required 3 metre setback of standard B6. Part B, Clause 55.054 private open space. The design fails to appropriately respond to the site by proposing private open space within the front setback of each dwelling, which fails to provide for an area of secluded open space as required by standard B28. Part C, Clause 55.045, overshadowing open space. The proposal results in shadowing of the adjoining secluded private open space of 88 Collier Crescent, impacting on the amenity of the dwelling contrary to the requirements of standard B21. Part 2, the proposal fails to provide the required amount of on-site parking. And point 3, the location, bulk, form and appearance of the new proposed dwellings and proposed works within the front setback to Collier Crescent will adversely affect the significance, character and appearance of the heritage place and are not in keeping with the character and appearance of adjacent buildings and the heritage place. If I have a seconder.
Is there a seconder? Councillor Thompson.
Look, I appreciate the applicant and the owners of the property coming to speak to us tonight, and I appreciate the work of the objectors as well in terms of raising some of their concerns and making us aware of it. As you've seen tonight, the matters that come before us are generally very tricky, and we've got to balance the needs before us. Personally, I feel like this is not in keeping with the character of an area. Yes, we do have a lot of applications that might not fit the existing character, and we've talked about neighbourhood character in itself not being a really strong argument when sometimes when it goes to be had. However, having had a look at this site in person and having had a sense of the heritage overlays and the protections that we've tried to afford these sort of areas, I feel like approving this would essentially undermines the whole point of heritage overlays in the first place. Yes, we have a number of tools to protect character and heritage. Heritage overlay is one of those. Yes, exceptions are made, but I feel like this is not in keeping with it at all. I appreciate the Collier Crescent frontage being, the site we might want to look at in terms of preserving that. But the adjacent street as well, I mean, you've got two frontages here, and I think you really have to be mindful of the impact on the entire area. I feel like it's too much in contrast with what's already there. I appreciate that you might want to subdivide and have another dwelling there, and I have no problem with that at all. I just think in terms of the character, it really does need to match it much more closely, and it's a long way to go to get to that point. And in terms of the open space to its 88 Collier Crescent, I was particularly concerned with that in terms of the open space, the open space and living areas of those adjacent properties and what this second property would do to that. So I hope that some other solution can be found, but that's the reason I'm moving with this.
Okay, thank you, Councillor. Councillor Thompson.
I really liked the actual look of the design. I thought it was quite well thought out, and I really enjoyed it. I looked at it and I thought this is quite nice, and in any other place in Moreland, I could see this being a fantastic extension to that existing home. And if it was an extension to that existing home, I think we'd probably be having a slightly different conversation here, because you've got a fence down there, and that would become an extension, and you'd be running off Collier Crescent there, and it'd lean the other way. But because you're actually subdividing this and turning that into the Teague Avenue frontage for that house, and that setback is not in keeping, it became a little bit tricky for me to sort of then be able to stomach and say, yes, this is in keeping with a little further on that particular road. In saying that, and one of the concerns that we obviously had was the removal of those significant trees in the rear. Whilst they are not significant, they do have quite an effect in shading on your neighbour there, and obviously taking away trees like that is disappointing, but that's certainly not the objection we're putting forward, but I'm conscious of it anyway. Bringing the family along and showing how it's obviously going to affect you is significant, but in keeping with all those other people in that particular street that have been there, you have moved into a heritage overlay, and with that comes a fair bit of responsibility. And I think just, subdividing it and turning this into frontage off Teague, in my mind, didn't quite work. Whereas, putting an extension on the existing property, I think would be a far better outcome, and a direction I would thoroughly recommend you to go in. And I think the other residents in the street would be more than happy to do that with a couple of tweaks, and away you go.
Okay, thanks, Councillor. Is there any other discussion? Councillor Lewis?
Look, I just want to say I met with the residents and I also met with the applicant's architect today, and I was actually really impressed with how much thought had gone into what you were doing, and it was very interesting. And I liked the plan. I didn't like the roof. I wouldn't say that though. But I just wanted to thank you for going through it with me, because I did appreciate it, and it did give me a much better understanding of where you guys were coming from. So.
Okay, thank you, Councillor. Right, but I'll put that to the vote. All those in favour, all those against, and I declare that carried. Robert?
Thank you, councillors. The Urban Planning Committee has decided to issue a notice of refusal to grant the planning permit, subject to the conditions contained within the alternate recommendation. All residents and the applicant will receive a copy of the notice of refusal. The applicant has 60 days in which to lodge an appeal with Merri-bek. If that happens, all objectors will receive a copy of that.
Thanks, Robert. Councillors, I'm aware that even though we extended the meeting for 2 hours, we do need to, under the standing orders, extend the meeting every half hour. So
Right.
can I have a procedural motion to
Yep.
extend the meeting for another half hour?
Me.
Moved Gillies. I don't think it needs a seconder to procedural. So all those in favour, all those against, I declare that carried. Thank you. So we can move now on to the last item for tonight's agenda, DED 69, 17 Frederick Street, Fawkner. Okay. Is there, Mark?
Yes.
Are you ready?
I'm ready. Thank you, Councillor. I'll put a quick image up on the screen. So the proposal is for 7 Frederick Street in Fawkner. It's for the construction of 2 double-storey dwellings. I've just got a site layout plan that describes the proposal. The proposal is a side-by-side arrangement. It includes 2 vehicle crossings and 2 garages, and is set off the one boundary. The recommendation within the agenda is recommending that the application be refused due to the introduction of a new policy of council that seeks to restrict vehicle crossings to 1 per property.
Thank you. This is not the one we've heard before, is it? No, we haven't heard this one before. Okay, is there an objector that would like to go first? Come forward.
Good evening. My name is Jihan from 15 Frederick Street, Fawkner. My objection is this 2 double-story building have 2 driveway, which is going to reduce landscaping and view of the street. Also, it's going to risk of the pedestrian, public pedestrian or bike riders. And also, I have on that side, which is that house on my house, northern side. My house have sun, mostly have sun on from northern side. So I have windows, bedrooms, and also I have solar panels on that side. That two double-story house gonna reduce my house sunlight. Also, I have a young family. I have 2 little children. They always sunny day they play in our backyard. Because I am working hard, I won't be home. I am wondering, my children is not gonna enjoy their life when they build that house, that double-story house there, because they're gonna watch that house wall, and they're not gonna have good nature and not gonna be good view for them. I don't want to say much about it. You can see what happening there. I hope you understand my situation, and thank you very much.
Okay, thank you. Thank you. Is there another objector? There's no other objectors. A representative from the applicant, please come forward.
Good evening, I won't be long. My name is Jason. I'm the designer for these drawings. I'm representing my client. Just in terms of just some points that were raised for overshadowing to the solar panels. Shadow diagrams were done. We don't overshadow the solar panels. Sunlight, there's plenty of sunlight to those solar panels for 10, 3 and 12 o'clock. Also, in terms of overshadowing to the rear backyard, very minimal. So I don't see how we would create too much shadow to his rear yard. Other points are that in terms of res code for upstairs, to the northern side, to the upper level, it has more than a 2 metre setback. It's about 2.4 metre setback. Our front setbacks comply with res code. Private open space comply with res code. The development isn't very high in terms of the streetscape. The materials that we're using are complementary to the streetscape. The design is complementary. So, yeah, there's nothing really that...
Okay, thank you. Are there any questions from councillors? No? No? Okay, councillors, is there any motions people would like to move? Councillor Thompson.
I have an alternate motion which I'm happy to share with the applicant. It does reduce the size of the upstairs somewhat. Change in recommendation. The Urban Planning Committee resolved that a notice of decision to grant a planning permit be issued for the construction of 2 double-storey dwellings at 17 Frederick Street, Faulkner. If I have a seconder, I'll speak to it.
Is there a seconder? Councillor Ratner.
Again, this is one of those ones that slipped through in the middle, so we're looking past the dual frontage. However, we were concerned with the overshadowing and the bulk, and so we have made some amendments to the size, in particular the 4th bedroom or the prayer room upstairs. We've made some amendments to it, not to the detriment of the building in any way, but certainly reducing it to give better access to the open space. So happy to furnish you with that, and obviously if it gets passed, happy to go forward with it, but a couple of significant change, well, reasonably significant changes, but not detrimental.
Okay, thank you, Councillor. Councillor Ratner. Well, I'm sorry, it was not an opportunity for speaking during the debate. Is there any other discussion? No, can't put it to the vote. All those in favour? All those against? I declare that carried.
Steps. Thank you, Councillor. Committee's resolved to issue a notice of decision. That decision will be posted to the objector and the applicant. The objector does have a 21-day period in which to lodge any appeals to VCAT. Equally, the applicant has a 60-day period in which to lodge any appeal against conditions. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Councillors, that is the last item on the agenda, so I shall now declare the urban planning meeting closed. Thank you very much. Thank you for those watching us at home, if there's anyone still watching. And thank you for everyone who was here as an observer, councillor or council officer. It was a very difficult meeting, and I'm glad we got through the agenda. And also thank you, Anne, as well, for observing that. I hope it wasn't too boring for you. I hope there's some differences that you would have noticed between local government in Denmark and Moreland City Council in regards to approval of planning applications. But thank you for being part of our meeting.